The first duck landed on a bright Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, lounging beside my backyard pool in a state of post-retirement bliss. After 30 years teaching high school science, I'd earned the right to silence, sun, and the gentle ripple of water. What I got instead was a loud splash and a quack. She was small, mottled, and unapologetically at home, her webbed feet gliding across the surface like a trained ballerina. 5 minutes later, her drake joined her, elegant and green-headed, as if answering a summons only ducks could hear. They circled each other twice before settling in like regulars at a dive bar. I named them Daisy and Donald. It was the first week of spring, and something about their presence felt right. They didn't demand anything. No loud music, no leaf blowers. Just a calm presence. It felt like a good omen. Until Karen showed up. Her arrival was heralded not by a knock, but by the sharp click of her heels against the pavement and the unmistakable rustle of a clipboard, her ever-present weapon of choice. Karen Fisher was the HOA president, unofficial neighborhood watchdog, and a woman who wielded the community charter like it was divine scripture. She stood just outside my gate, arms crossed, expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Brian," she said with the kind of condescension usually reserved for scolding toddlers, "I received a report that you're harboring wildlife." I stared at her. "They're ducks, Karen. They landed in the pool. I didn't smuggle them in."
She didn't laugh.
Karen never laughed. Instead, she consulted her clipboard. Section 4B, subsection 9. Wildlife interference. Pools are for human use only. This is a health hazard and could attract coyotes. "They're just resting," I said. "It's nesting season. They'll move on soon." "Then move them," she snapped. "I can't. They're federally protected. Interfering with a nest can carry a fine." She blinked, not used to pushback. "Are you threatening me with federal law?" "I'm informing you," I replied, calm but firm. Karen pursed her lips so tightly they nearly vanished. "If you refuse to comply, I'll escalate this to the board."
And she did.
The email came that evening, dressed in formal language and inflated self-importance. "Dear Mr. Myers, it has come to the attention of the HOA that your backyard pool has become a wildlife attraction. This constitutes a violation under our community regulations. You are hereby instructed to remove the ducks within 48 hours or face financial penalties and legal action through our Compliance Division." Compliance Division. As if we lived in some suburban dystopia where ducks were dissidents. I responded with a politely worded email, attaching a link to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and reminding her that any attempt to disturb the nest could have legal consequences beyond the reach of her clipboard. That was Thursday. On Sunday morning, I woke to find a crisp, white envelope taped to my mailbox. A fine, $100 for noncompliance with wildlife regulations. It was absurd, offensive even, but I could have let it go. What I couldn't ignore came next. 2 days later, Karen stood at the edge of my yard again, this time with her phone raised and a voice laced with theatrical panic. "Yes, 911. I'm calling to report a dangerous situation. My neighbor has ducks, wild ducks, and he's encouraging them to nest."
"Yes."
"Yes, near a pool. It's unsanitary, possibly a health risk." I watched her from the patio, stunned, as she dramatically paced, as if surrounded by flamingos armed with switchblades. By the time the patrol car pulled up, I was already prepared. The officer, young, tired, and clearly aware he was being used, listened patiently, glanced at the pool, and turned back to me. "Sir," he said, "are you intentionally keeping the ducks?" "Nope," I replied. "They chose me, and I'm just choosing not to violate federal law." The officer nodded. "You're within your rights. Sorry for the trouble." Karen, standing nearby with her arms flailing, turned redder than a boiled lobster. The patrol car left. But the damage was done. I was no longer just the retired science teacher with a pool. I was now public enemy number one in Karen's clipboard-bound kingdom. She wanted a war over ducks?
Fine.
Let the feathers fly. 3 days after the 911 stunt, a new find showed up, this time $250. It was delivered with ceremony. A printed notice taped to my front door in bold, unforgiving red ink, and a manila envelope shoved in my mailbox, stamped with urgent HOA action. The language was harsher now, laced with threats of legal counsel, code enforcement, and property liens. Karen had escalated. The ducks, meanwhile, remained oblivious. Daisy sat nestled in the corner behind the pool pump, her speckled body half hidden by a patch of rosemary I hadn't gotten around to trimming. Donald, ever vigilant, paddled the water like a feathery sentinel. I'd started putting out cracked corn, not to bait them, but because it felt wrong letting them starve under siege. Karen thought otherwise. That afternoon, my security cameras picked up movement at the side fence. At precisely 6:42 p.m., she tossed what looked like breadcrumbs over the slats. I zoomed in. White bread, torn hastily by hand. The tactic was clear: lure more ducks in, then claim I was attracting a nuisance population. I saved the footage and backed it up in triplicate. I didn't grow up spoiling for conflict, but I wasn't unfamiliar with bullies. I'd taught in high schools for 3 decades, seen every variety of petty tyrant, manipulative tattletale, and power-hungry hall monitor. Karen was nothing new. She just had a title and a clipboard, and she was clearly gearing up for a show. The following week, I received a formal wildlife compliance order, hand-delivered by 2 members of the HOA board, neighbors I barely knew who now treated me like a biohazard. The order demanded immediate environmental deterrence, which, they said, included pool draining, fence netting, and loud ultrasonic devices. That's illegal, I said. They're nesting. You can't touch them. One of them, a man named Eric who used to wave to me while mowing his lawn, shifted awkwardly. Karen says it's an emergency measure. Public health. What's next? I asked. Evacuate the squirrels? Quarantine the butterflies. They didn't answer. They just left the papers and walked off without looking back. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A text from my niece, Sarah, media student, part-time activist, and professional chaos enthusiast. Saw the duck drama on your Facebook. Want to make a thing of it? We could live stream it. Or better, throw a duck day. I laughed at first, but then I looked out the window. Karen had installed a temporary security camera facing my yard. A plastic sign read, "Wildlife under surveillance, property owner non-compliant." That was it. She wanted drama. She wanted headlines. She wanted a reason to escalate until she'd bled me dry in fines or driven me out altogether.
Fine.
If she wanted a spectacle, I'd give her one she'd never forget. The idea began as a joke, just a small, silly rebellion. Maybe a few duck-themed lawn signs, some inflatable pool birds, and a banner reading "Duck Lives Matter." But as I stared at Karen's new camera and thought about the dozens of other residents she'd fined into silence, something in me shifted. This wasn't just about ducks anymore. It was about control. About pushing back against a woman who believed rules were weapons and community was whatever she said it was. The ducks were just the excuse. I got on the phone. First, I called City Hall to confirm what I already suspected. As long as I wasn't charging money or blocking traffic, I could host a private neighborhood awareness event on my property. I asked about sound ordinances, float permits, banner regulations. Then I made a list. Sarah was in charge of social media. My neighbor Henry played in a local brass band. I remembered a former student who built parade floats for county fairs. By the time I went to bed, I had 20 volunteers and a tentative date. It would be loud. It would be ridiculous. And it would be entirely legal. Karen wanted a reason to wage war. I would give her a parade. The morning of Duck Day arrived with a sky so blue, it looked painted. A calm breeze rolled through the neighborhood, but beneath that peace, the air practically crackled with anticipation. By 9 a.m., the first floats began to arrive. Henry's band rolled in on a flatbed trailer covered in yellow streamers and giant foam duck heads, playing an upbeat brass version of Let It Go that was somehow both obnoxious and magnificent. Sarah's media team, a scrappy crew of film students with drones and DSLRs, was already live streaming under the hashtag #QuackBack. At the center of it all stood my backyard, transformed into ground zero for a suburban revolution. Pool noodles had been sculpted into duck shapes. Inflatable mallards bobbed proudly beside Donald and Daisy, who now had a neat little floating nest ringed with caution tape, protected by federal law. Neighbors showed up in droves, most wearing homemade duck hats or yellow shirts with slogans like "Quack is whack," "Unless it's in my pool," and "I stand with the ducks." A few even brought signs calling out Karen directly. "Let them swim. HOA tyranny ends now." Clipboard, "Karen can't cancel nature." To my surprise, even the quiet folks, the ones who usually waved but never spoke, joined in. One by one, they came forward with stories of fines, threats, and petty letters. Karen's reign hadn't just targeted me, she'd ruled with intimidation for years. My duck rebellion had cracked the dam wide open. At exactly 10:32 a.m., she arrived. Karen marched down the street in a lemon-yellow pantsuit, flanked by two board members who looked like they regretted every decision that had brought them to this moment. She clutched her clipboard like a holy relic, eyes scanning the crowd like a warden preparing for a riot. "This is a violation of HOA code," she barked, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "This is unauthorized assembly, unregistered event activity, noise ordinance infractions." "This is legal," I interrupted, stepping forward. "City Hall confirmed. We're within our rights. Private property. No ticket sales. No obstructions. Just good neighbors enjoying nature." "You're mocking the HOA," she snapped. I smiled.
No, Karen.
"I'm celebrating wildlife awareness." Her eyes narrowed. "Then consider this your final warning." She turned, stormed toward the edge of the yard, where Donald stood tall on the lip of the pool like a feathery little general, and raised her phone again. That was her mistake. This time, Sarah's cameras were rolling from 3 angles. "This woman is harboring aggressive waterfowl," Karen shouted into the phone. "They're attacking the neighborhood." And right then, as if summoned by divine comedy, Donald flapped his wings, waddled over to the edge, and let out the loudest, angriest quack I'd ever heard. The crowd erupted into laughter. Karen, flustered and red-faced, tried to regroup. "This is an unsafe environment. Children could be infected with avian." A toddler in a duck costume waddled past her, holding his mother's hand. "Diseases," she finished weakly. By now, Sarah's live stream was climbing in viewers. Comments flooded in. "Free the ducks. Karen's quackdown begins. She really called 911 on birds?" Karen, realizing her optics were spiraling, pulled out a final weapon, an official HOA cease and desist letter. "You are ordered to dismantle this gathering immediately." I took the letter, scanned it, and handed it back. "Nice try. But we're within the law. And the ducks," I gestured toward Donald and Daisy, "are protected by more than your clipboard." Karen stood still for a beat, trembling with impotent rage. Then she spun on her heel and walked away, trailed by her silent entourage. Applause broke out. But I wasn't done yet. I stepped up onto the float, took the mic from Henry's band, and raised my hand for quiet. "Neighbors," I said, "today wasn't just about ducks. It was about taking back our community, about standing up to bullies who hide behind rules. We are not the enemy. The ducks are not the enemy. We live here. We belong here." The crowd roared. Karen disappeared behind her hedges. And just like that, the float rolled forward, into the street, into memory, into something more powerful than HOA rules ever could be. It wasn't a protest. It was a parade. By the time the last float turned the corner and the final kazoo solo faded into applause, the tone of the entire neighborhood had changed. For once, people weren't hiding behind hedges or whispering about fines. They were talking, laughing, trading duck jokes and HOA horror stories like old war buddies. Kids splashed in my pool with inflatable birds. Someone started handing out duck-shaped cookies. The rebellion had turned into a block party. And Karen? She'd slammed her door around noon and hadn't been seen since. I expected retaliation. I even prepared for it. Double-checked every local ordinance, filed a formal complaint about harassment, Printed out a copy of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act to hang next to my front door like a sacred text. But for days, nothing. Then, a strange shift. An unmarked envelope arrived, slipped under my doormat like a ransom note. Inside was a formal HOA announcement, typed on crisp white paper and bearing the impersonal chill of bureaucracy. The board acknowledges resident feedback regarding recent events and has voted to reassess wildlife-related clauses in community code enforcement. It wasn't an apology, but it was a retreat. That same week, 2 board members quietly resigned. One left a note in my mailbox. "You were right. It's gone too far." Then came the cherry on top. The local paper picked up the story after Sarah's video hit 1 million views. Headline: Quack Rebellion, How 1 Man and 2 Ducks Took on an HOA Tyrant. They ran it with a picture of me, Donald, and Daisy in front of the float. I didn't realize how proud I looked until I saw it through someone else's lens. Within a month, the HOA held an emergency election. Karen ran for re-election. She lost in a landslide. Turns out, people don't forget when you call 911 on ducks. Karen didn't take it well. She moved out a few weeks later, selling her house quietly, slinking out of the neighborhood like a disgraced dictator. One day she was there. The next, a for sale sign sat in her hydrangeas. No note. No farewell. Just silence. The day after she left, I invited the neighborhood over one more time. Nothing fancy, just lawn chairs, lemonade, and a replay of the parade footage projected on my garage door. Henry played his tuba. Donald and Daisy still swam. The HOA board, now reshuffled with actual human beings, showed up too. They thanked me. They listened. One of them even brought a petition to officially codify a duck sanctuary zone around backyard water features. It passed unanimously, and that, in the end, was the win I hadn't known I was chasing. Not just the fall of Karen, but the rise of something better. Something shared. Something earned. It wasn't about ducks. It was about dignity. About drawing a line, not in protest, but in pride. About saying enough when someone decides the rules are more important than the people they're meant to protect. Weeks passed. Life settled. But every morning, when I sip my coffee by the pool, I smile. Because the ducks still come back. Not just Donald and Daisy anymore. They brought friends. Whole families now waddle through the yard like they own the place. And maybe they do in a way. They're part of the neighborhood, just like the rest of us. I keep the banner folded in a drawer. Quack Lives Matter. And sometimes when a neighbor walks by with a little wave and a knowing grin, I know they remember too. The clipboard's gone. The tyranny's over. And the pond is ours again.